Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 7, Chapter 5, Text number 25. Nishamyetat Sutavacho Hiraṇyakaśipus Tada Guruputram Uvachedam Rusha Praspuritadharaha Nishamyetat Sutavacho Hiraṇyakaśipustada Guruputram Vachedam Rusha Praspuritadharaha Nishamyetat Sutavacho Hiraṇyakaśipustada Guruputram Vachedam Rusha Praspuritadharaha Nishamyetat Sutavacho Hiraṇyakaśipustada Guruputram Vachedam Rusha Praspuritadharaha Anybody else?
Nishamyaitat sutavacho Hiraṇyakaśipu stada Guruputram uvachedam Rucha prashpurita daraha.
Tapas, are you on Zoom as well?
Nishamyaitat sutavacho Hiraṇyakaśipu stada Guruputram uvachedam Rusha Paspuritat Para
Nishamyaitat, Nishamya, hearing. Etat, this. Sutavachaha, speech from his son. Hiraṇyakaśipu, Hiraṇyakaśipu. Tada, at that time. Guruputram, unto the son of Shukracharya, his spiritual master. Uvacha, spoke. Idam, this. Rusha, with anger. Praspurita, trembling. Adharaha, whose lips. Translation: after hearing these words of devotional service from the mouth of his son Prahlāda, Hiraṇyakaśipu was extremely angry. His lips trembling, he spoke as follows to Shanda, the son of his guru Shukracharya. Next verse: Brahmabandho kimetadde vipaksham shrayata sata asaram grahito balo mamanadritya durmade. Translation: O unqualified, most heinous son of a Brahmana, you have disobeyed my order and taken shelter of the party of my enemies. You have taught this poor boy about devotional service. What is this nonsense? Purport: in this verse, the word asaram, meaning having no substance, is significant. For a demon, there is no substance in the process of devotional service, but to a devotee, devotional service is the only essential factor in life. Since Hiraṇyakaśipu did not like devotional service, the essence of life, he chastised Prahlāda Mahārāja's teachers with harsh words. Is this old? No? Did you put this in there? There's pineapple juice in there, for those who are wondering. Om ajnanatimidandasya jnananjana shalakaya chakshurunmilitam yena tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam sthapitam yena bhutale svayam rupagadamahyam dadati svapadantikam. Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So, there's a verse in the Bhagavad Gita which is relevant, or which I felt was relevant at least, to this purport that Srila Prabhupada has written here. Very short, but powerful, or poignant, you could say, purport. The verse is, Yanisha sarvabhutanam tasyam jagrati samyami yasyam jagrati bhutani sanisha pashyato munehe. That what is night for all living beings, Yanisha sarvabhutanam, that which is night for all living beings, tasyam jagrati samyami, that is the time of awakening. This is metaphorically speaking. It's the time of awakening for those who are saintly. And conversely, that which is the time of night for those who are saintly is the time of awakening for those who are, well, for everybody else, basically it says. So this is, of course, not meant to be taken literally, but it's explaining how those who are saintly and common ordinary people have very differing values. Their values are completely different, just like we're seeing here with Prahlāda Mahārāja and Hiraṇyakaśipu. There's a very stark contrast between them. They're two very different kind of personalities. And this is a dichotomy which is brought out a lot in the Vedas, between the Devas and the Asuras, and in the Bhagavatam it comes up a lot, like you have, that Ambarish Maharaj and Durvasa Muni, and, so many different, Suruchi, Suniti, all these different personalities, which are there in the Bhagavatam to highlight the fact that being saintly is good, and being demoniac or being evil is not good. That's a basic teaching of the Vedic literatures. Now, of course, why that is a whole philosophical discussion. Of course, also it's necessary to define what is actually being saintly. There's many verses in this regard. Dravida Prabhu the other day was quoting that verse, Etava janmasa palyam dehinami hadehishu prana arthardhya vacha Shreya Acharanam Sada, that the perfection of one's life is, for those who are embodied, is that for other embodied entities one should use their life, their wealth, their words, and their mind for the ultimate benefit of others. One should do that ultimate benefit unto others. So there's other verses, Titikshava Karunaka Suhridam Sarvadehinam Ajata Shatrava Shanta Sadhava Sadhu Bhushanaha, that those who are sadhus, they have these different decorations, being a friend to all, being very tolerant, humble, peaceful. All these are considered to be good qualities. And again, it's a whole philosophical discussion why these are considered to be good qualities. I think everybody here is mostly aware of that, and it's not so relevant to this particular verse. So anyways, so many verses like that in the Vedic literatures. Who is saintly? Who is demoniac? That's also talked about. But the ultimate conclusion of the Vedas, of the Vedic literatures, is that ultimately none of these good qualities can be there in a real sense without devotional service. Yasyasti bhaktir bhagavati kinchana sarvairgunais tatra samasute saraha. That without being a devotee of Krishna and engaging in devotional service, there is no real basis for good qualities. Therefore, in any kind of real sense, those good qualities can't exist. the second half of this verse says, Harava bhaktyasya kuto mahat guna manorathe nasati davato bahi. Why is that? Because those who aren't engaging in devotional service, those who aren't devotees of Krishna, or even have some basic idea of God, let's not, that's the basis of it, have some basic idea about God. Morality is impossible for them. Why? Because they're on the, like this verse says, Manoratha, the chariot of the mind. Ratha, like we have Ratha Yatra, means cart or chariot. But they're on the Manoratha, the chariot of the mind. Which means that their mentality is like Krishna says in the 16th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Ishvaroham aham bogi. That I am the controller and that everything in this world is meant for my enjoyment. And there's another verse also, which is in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Pumsastriyamatani bhavametam tayor meto hridaya granti mahu ato griha kshetra sutabdavitar janasya moho yam aham mameti. That one who is on the chariot of the mind, it means that they're thinking only in terms of aham mameti. Aham mama iti. Aham means I and mama means mine. Aham mama iti means thus. So, one who is on that chariot of the mind, who's thinking that everything is meant for me, that the all in all is ultimately it's my pleasure. That's janma sapayam. That's the goal of my life, or the fruit of my life, is to obtain pleasure and avoid misery. If such a person has that mentality, then being saintly in the sense that we described earlier doesn't always serve that purpose. To be tolerant, to be merciful, to be a friend to everybody, that doesn't work all the time to get what you want. So, therefore, for such people, even if they may display some semblance of good qualities, if they don't have the proper basis for those qualities, then it's very fragile. Their saintliness is very fragile. And as soon as they get the chance, or as soon as they get the opportunity to be, you could say, unsaintly, they'll take it because they have to. That's the goal of their life. They have to take the opportunity because otherwise, like there's a common thing now, especially in, you could say, so-called spiritual circles, that if it doesn't serve you, then give it up. You only accept what serves you. I heard somebody say this the other day. What serves you? Without a view of Krishna, without a view of God, or without a view of any kind of absolute truth, there's no such thing as morality. Anything goes. You can be saintly, you can be, there's not even this concept of saintly versus non-saintly, or saintly versus demoniac, good versus evil. This doesn't exist on the material platform. There's a verse in the Bhagavatam, Kim badram, kim abhadram va. What is auspicious and what is inauspicious? Dvaita syavastuna kiyat, vachodatam tad anratam, manasadhyatam evacha. What is auspicious and what is inauspicious for one who is on the material platform? Vachodatam tad anratam. Everything they speak refers to falsity. And similarly, their mind, everything they think about too. They can't think about anything real. Because if you don't have a full picture of reality. For instance, if I don't know what a bench is, but I know what wood is, then I would see that and I would say, well, that's a very interesting arrangement of wood. Or maybe I would say, that's a very interesting looking tree. But I can't speak about it and I can't think about it because I don't know the full picture. I don't know the substance. My understanding doesn't have a strong foundation. In order to know what a bench is, you have to know about wood and you have to know about benches and you have to know about the purpose of benches. So in a similar way, those who are on the material platform can't know anything real because they see everything as the objects of enjoyment, that this is for me. Or maybe not for me, but this is for us. This world is for humans, or this world is for, my race, or, whatever it is. People have different ideas. This land is your land, this land is my land, as Woody Guthrie said. But it's not true. The land's not your land, it's also not my land. From California to the New, it's not. None of it is mine, none of it is yours. It's just land, that's all it is. It's just land. So, but if you have this mentality that this land is your land, this land is my land, then you can't really know the land because it's not yours or mine. But you're thinking of it as something it's not, as mine or yours. So, therefore, if you can't know anything really, if you can't see everything for what it is, any aspect of reality, then your concept of good and bad, like in the Chaitanya Charitamrita says, Dvaite Bhadra Bhadra Gyan Shab Monodharma. That on the material platform, knowledge of good and bad, e bhalo e mondo, e shab brahma, it's all a mistake. It's all just monodharma. It's all just dharma or something which is concocted within the mind. Because it doesn't exist. It's not based on anything real. So, for one who doesn't have any idea of good and bad, then anything goes, and when anything goes, it always goes down. If anything goes, then it's always down. So, and we see this over and over again in history. We were recently discussing at breakfast, where all the great philosophical discussions take place at breakfast. But we were recently discussing how there was one, and there was one essay written, one of my godbrothers sent me some time ago, a couple of years ago, but I don't have it anymore. I wanted to read it to refer to for this class, but I wasn't able to find it. But it shows how in every civilization in history, practically speaking, there's been a pattern. There's been a pattern of basically, some struggle to, establish itself. Then there's been a period of growth. And then when that growth gets to a certain point, then people become comfortable. Like, what did they say? They say, hard times. What is it? Does anybody know? Hard times create strong men create good times create weak men create hard times. Something like that. So there's a similar pattern that every civilization in history has followed. Basically, there's a period of struggle to establish itself. There's a growth period. Then, as that growth period kind of, gets to a certain point, then people become very comfortable. They start indulging themselves. Life becomes much more comfortable and decadent. And then people get into all kinds of, especially sexual promiscuity becomes prominent. It's mentioned also cross-dressing, all these different things. They start coming about, and then everything falls. People just become weak-minded, they just become completely lusty and greedy, and then the whole thing goes away. The whole thing crumbles. It happened with the Romans, happened with the Greeks, like that. So when one doesn't have any concept of good and bad, or you could say a concept of good and bad outside of one's own pleasure, then ultimately one has to fall into a very kind of hellish condition of life. And this is a symptom of ignorance, that one is constantly going for that which is immediately pleasurable. Shreyas versus preyas. One is always constantly going for that which is immediately pleasurable. Like Bhagavad Gita says, which is nectar in the beginning and which is ultimately poison in the end. One engages in activities which are ultimately destructive. For the purpose of what? Their own pleasure. Just some sense gratification. Such people, like Mukunda Prabhu quoted yesterday in his class, such people, they're completely fixed on this mentality, completely fixed. You can't, and this is another symptom, yastu kritsnavat ekasmin, that they have this view of reality that they just won't give up. This one-pointed view that my pleasure or my sense gratification is the all in all. They just don't give it up. They won't give it up, and they can't be convinced otherwise. But for human beings, because such people really actually aren't even human beings. There's a, what is it? Dharmena hinu pashabi samanaha. That without dharma, without some idea of what to do, without some idea of good and bad, or just some basic kind of morality, then people are no different than animals. And for them, for such, you could say, animal-like people, like Srila Prabhupada's emphasizing this purport, when they see or when they hear about devotional service, there's no substance there. They think of it as just another, whatever, this thing or that thing, something trying to limit them, something trying to restrict them. That's often what comes up, that, oh, this is just another thing trying to restrict me. People often say about religion that, oh, it was just created to control people, created by kings or created by people in power just to control people and keep them docile and keep peace. Or it was just created for ignorant people so that they wouldn't have to, or you could say to explain certain aspects of reality that they didn't understand. The God of the gaps, as they say. That as science, or you could say as our knowledge of the universe became more and more advanced, then, God's influence became smaller and smaller. So like this, they don't see any substance in devotional service. They don't see that it's anything important. In fact, they see that it's something which is actually very harmful, something which is actually very, we could say, harmful or something which is very distasteful. So, something which is, very distasteful. Why? Because it requires them to give up their mentality. It requires them to give up their sinful mentality. It requires them to give up their, and not just their mentality, but their activities too. It requires them to completely shift their entire life. And that's what devotional service is. That is why the Vedic literatures talk so much about this dichotomy between devotees and demons. Because it really is a complete dichotomy. It's a 180-degree flip between devotees and demons. And therefore, when this verse in Bhagavad Gita, when devotees see the activities of demons, and when demons see the activities of devotees, they can't understand. Because their mentality is completely different. Just like with Prahlāda Mahārāja. If a person were to hear about Prahlāda Mahārāja and how he was being tortured and how he was being this and that, and they would say, how could a person, they say it's impossible, they say it's fiction. Because how could somebody tolerate that without any, problem? It's impossible. And similarly, sometimes, if you have there's some very, pure devotees out there, you tell them of some of the things that materialists are doing, and they say, no way, it can't be true. How could somebody do something like that? How could somebody think like that? How could somebody have such a, mentality? So, two completely different outlooks, but they're not equal. They're different, but they're not equal. One is better than the other. Like Srila Prabhupada said, everybody else is wrong and we are right. Second. Everybody else is wrong and the devotees are right. Why? Because the devotees, like in the third canto, there's one verse. Ko nama loke purushartha saravit. We are saravit. The devotees are saravit. Sara means the essence. Like this verse is, in this verse the word asara, meaning having no substance. Sara means substance. Vaishnavas are described as saragrahi. Saragrahi, I think, means they take the essence. This is what being a Paramahamsa means. Being a Paramahamsa means like a swan. Swan has the ability to take water and milk in its mouth and separate the milk, take only the milk and spit out the water. Such is the ability of a swan. So in a similar way, Vaishnavas, they have the ability to see the world to see the essence of the world, to see that which is essential, and take only that and leave everything else. Therefore, sometimes the point is brought up that even Vaishnavas might engage in some, activities which might appear, you could say, material. Prahlāda Mahārāja went to school, or you could say, let's give a better example. Better example would be like in the early days, devotees, in the very early days, I'm talking like, in the 60s, when Srila Prabhupada first came to America, when he had his first, followers. Jayananda and Tamal Krishna Maharaj and all the other devotees who were there, they were working jobs. They had to go to work. And who was it that was working at Kodak? That was Tamal Krishna Maharaj, yeah. And then Jayananda Prabhu was driving a taxi. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj couldn't take it, yeah. Yeah. And other devotees, so many Grihastha devotees nowadays, they work and they make a living, and they have to do taxes and things like that. So although these activities, they appear, they give some resemblance of material activities, if one is in the consciousness of doing them for Krishna, then they're not at all material activities. But for a materialist, they see this and they think, just see this person's, there's nobody there, don't worry. This person, he's a materialist, It looks the same, but it's not. Why? Because the essence is different. The sara, the substance is completely different. They're for completely different purposes. One of them is doing it for my own pleasure. One of them is doing it for Krishna's pleasure. The essence of devotional service, the beginning of devotional service, is to understand and internalize that I'm living for Krishna's pleasure. To understand and internalize that Jiva Swarup Hoy Krishna Nitidas, that the Jiva, who is me, is eternally a servant of Krishna. That's the essence of the beginning of devotional service. And everything after that, then if one has this basic understanding, everything after that is like we were reading in that the purport to verse 23 and 24, the long Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu. Srila Prabhupada says the basic, or you could say the ideal, is that one first offers his entire existence to Krishna, and then everything after that becomes service. Even activities of maintaining oneself, even activities of walking, eating, sleeping, drinking, all these things become aspects or angas of devotional service. But for a demon, for somebody who is fixed on this demoniac mentality that everything is for me, they can't understand. They can't understand, why would you live for Krishna's pleasure? I remember having that question when I was first hearing about devotional service. Okay, dedicate your whole life to Krishna, but why? Give up sense gratification and do everything only for Krishna and only serve Krishna. I remember thinking, why? And I had a friend also who asked me this sometime later, and I told them, I said, well, because that's who you are. That's the goal of life, Of course, there's other ways to philosophically justify it, But it starts with, the fact that there's a God and who we are. But ultimately, it really just comes down to, why are we serving Krishna? Because we don't get anything out of it. Of course, we get happiness, we get all these things, but that's not why we're doing it. Serve Krishna unmotivatedly, serve Krishna with no desire for happiness. Why do that? Because that's who we are. So if one has some intelligence and one is somewhat open-minded, then they can understand these things. Actually, my spiritual master gave one seminar on this verse in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Jiva Swarup Hoy Krishna Nitya Das. It's a very amazing seminar, actually. But he said philosophy begins with, when you inquire like Sanatana Goswami. Philosophy begins when you say, I don't know who I am and I don't know why I'm suffering, please help me. That's when philosophy actually begins. Philosophy is not an ascending process, because you can't understand anything with the ascending process. Ascending process means I start with my, brain and I try to work my way up and try to understand everything. But the thing is, our brain is limited. I think everybody here acknowledges that our brain is limited. We can't understand everything. But, therefore, the Vedic literatures say that the ultimate pramana, or the ultimate evidence, is shabda, to hear. To hear from who? From an authorized source. And when we hear from an authorized source, Srila Prabhupada gives the example, just like if you don't know who your father is, who do you ask? You ask your mother. You can't figure it out on your own. Of course, nowadays you could do a DNA test and all these different things. But before all that, of course, somebody might say, well, that's evidence that the ascending process works. I created a process by which I can know my own father without needing my mother. But it doesn't go so far. But before all that, you can't know your father just, it's not an intuitive kind of knowledge. So therefore, what do? You ask your mother. And then your mother says, this is your father. Why? Because she has experience. She has the experience that, yes, I, united with this man, and then a baby resulted from that, and that was you. So she has the experience. So to hear from an from an experienced source about what is true and what is not true, that is required for understanding what's truth and what's not truth. The default is, and people say so many things about religion, they say so many things about this, none of them have thought about it deeply. The default mentality of the material world is that I'm the enjoyer and that everything is meant for me. That's the default mentality. Most, 99.999% of people haven't thought about it, anything else very deeply. Because this attachment to this mentality is so strong. Even all these big atheists, even all these, big so-called philosophers, they might come up with so many so-called, philosophical arguments against theism. Most of them are on the basis, very clearly, for one who's a little bit sober, very clearly on the basis of the fact that I'm very attached to being the controller and the enjoyer. Most people's, and even in spiritual circles too, so-called spiritual circles. People say, oh, why do I have to give this up? Why do I have to give that up? It can be spiritual, can be used for spirituality. Most of it is because, or it's on the basis of just being attached. So one who's attached to the material world, their destination is not bright, not so good. Their future is not so bright. But for those who engage in devotional service, although to a materialist it seems very counterintuitive, that if I give up a desire for my own pleasure, then I'll actually be happy. If I stop working for pleasure, then I'll be happy. It's counterintuitive, because the default mentality, like I said, of the mature world is Ishvara Ham Bogi. But when one does this, then one will realize Pratyakshavagavam Dharmyam, Krishna consciousness is something that can be seen. Rajavidya Rajaguhyam Pavitramidam Uttamam. It's eternally pure, it's the greatest knowledge. Rajavidya Rajaguhyam, but it's hidden. It's hidden from those who don't, who can't see anything in it. It's hidden from those who are too attached to their own sinful mentality. But if one, like one devotee told me, there's a saying in AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, which is a really good saying actually. It's really awesome. The process works if you work it. Say it works if you work it. So Krishna consciousness in a similar way, if you, with an open mind, engage in the process of Krishna consciousness, you'll see that it actually works. Pratyakshavagavam dharmyam susukam kartamavyayam. You'll see with your own eyeballs that it works. And you'll feel very happy. So everything is there, everything's laid out, it's very simple. Not quite easy, but it's very simple. That Shastra says you do this, then you do it. Shastra says you don't do that, then you don't do it. Prabhupada says that this is good, try to follow it. Prabhupada says this is bad, you don't follow it. Simple, but because of, again, our mentality, it's difficult. Simple does not equal easy, but it is simple. We can take solace in the fact that devotional service is very simple. Prabhupada says it's simple for the simple. If we're simple-minded, if we can just hear and accept, then Krishna consciousness will be very easy. So to the extent that we're resistant, then Krishna consciousness will be very difficult. But if you think about it, sense gratification is very easy. It's very easy to arrange. If you want to gratify your senses, then it's very easy. You can go out and be a complete sense gratifier, and there's all different ways to gratify your senses, that the mature world offers now. So, like they say, the door's over there. But if you want Krishna, then that's something else. If you want Krishna, which, if you could say, if you've taken to the process of Krishna consciousness, then there is some desire there to attain Krishna. So if you've begun practicing Krishna consciousness, follow it to its end. Either do it or don't. But of course, Shastra recommends you do it. And do it really well. Because again, sense gratification is very easy, it's right there, but you're here now, so you may as well just go for it, is what our Shastras tell us. So I'll stop there, it's 8:31, if there's any questions or comments. Hare Krishna.
Yeah, I have a question. As you mentioned, and then it's very clear throughout our books, is that the desire for one's own sense gratification is the road to a lot of suffering, again and again, obviously. So we have to come to the point of simply desiring to serve Krishna for his pleasure, right? But isn't there kind of an understanding, and others from experience, that and in Prabhupada's preaching, going home back to Godhead. In other words, this was an inducement, and you would describe what's going on in there. It's a life of eternal bliss and knowledge. So from the point of just entering the house of Bhakti, and we're more or less conditioned and everything, but doesn't that have to be one of the impetuses for doing? In other words, it's paradoxical. In that, in order to really enjoy like anything, you have to forget about your own enjoyment and just think of Krishna's enjoyment and giving him enjoyment. And then you find in doing that there's a pleasure. There's a pleasure that you can't get from sense gratification. And if you're strict and you really stick to that, then you can finally experience that at every moment. So the reason I'm answering is that there's so many verses. Like this famous verse, Tunde Tandavani Ting Batunate. I don't know how much nectar these syllables, Krishna had produced. Why do I have only 2 ears? If I had millions there, I could really taste it. Well, that sounds like he's wanting to enjoy, more. If I can only have more ears, Or that's one verse that you probably don't know. It's from, I think, the Stavamala. Nanda nanda padara binda yosyanda mana makadanda bindava sindava padamasauki sambadam nandiyanta vidiyam mamanisham. So he's saying that, O Nanda Nandana, the drops of makaranda, flower honey that are coming from your lotus feet, they're just these bindus, but they're not actually bindus, they're actually sindhus. They're actually oceans of the highest happiness. Please, may I always delight in these, forever, in serving your lotus feet and experiencing that. So it's kind of these two things going on. You want to experience the highest happiness by giving Krishna as much happiness as possible. But really, the way to do that is to be completely fixed on giving Krishna pleasure and what gives pleasure, and then you find yourself automatically. Isn't it? It's something like that. There's a little paradox going on there.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I don't have more to say on that, but yeah.
It's just like this verse. It's not a verse. It's a little line. You would love it. I'll show you where it is in the purport in the 2:3:10. Akama Sarvakamava. So Prabhupada quotes this from the Jiva Goswami's Sandarbha. He didn't say which one. I couldn't find it, but it's there somewhere. Bhajaniya Padama Purusha Sukhamatra Sukhatva. You know it. Isn't that directly to the point? That Bhajaniya Padama Purusha Sukhamatra. So ultimate bhakti, pure bhakti, is taking one's only pleasure in giving pleasure to the Lord. And then, since the Lord has unlimited ability to enjoy pleasure, then your ability to enjoy pleasure also is boundless. But we won't think about that. We'll just give it. Anyway.
Jai. Hare Krishna. Anything more? Vijay Krishna Prabhu, do you have something for us today?
Vijay Krishna Prabhu, because in this Sangha there are two Vijayas.
No, Vijay Prabhu is not here anymore.
Oh, so you're referring to me?
Of course, Prabhu. You're the only Vijay. You're the only Vijay Prabhu here now. Vijay Prabhu has moved to Houston.
Oh, I see. Thank you for telling me.
Sure, Prabhu. So if you're ever on the Houston live stream, you can see him.
What?
If you're ever on the Houston live stream, then you can see him and ask him a question.
Of course, I'll do that. And his association through ISKCON San Diego obviously will be missed.
Yes, of course.
Yes. Mostly his Srimad Bhagavatam classes.
Yes.
And the answers he gave to my questions when it happened for me to ask of him any question, his answers were always very helpful and
breathtaking,
very pleasing to the soul. Okay, yes, I will contribute by offering you the following question.
Okay.
Here in the purport, Srila Prabhupada is mentioning that devotional service is the essence of life. So, based on this, my exact question is, how do you explain the concept of essence in this context? In the context of this quote offered to us by Srila Prabhupada in his purport.
Yes, so essence. Well, Srila Prabhupada translates it as, devotional service, the essence of life. The essence of life meaning that that's what we're meant to be doing. That there is no other, that's the essential factor of life. Meaning that everything else is auxiliary. Everything else is not, you could say, is insufficient. Whereas devotional service, if one did devotional service and nothing else, it would be completely sufficient. Because devotional service is what we're meant to be doing, and everything else can aid devotional service, but it's not necessary for devotional service. So that's a short answer, but is that an okay answer?
Yes, that is an okay answer. Thank you very much. You're most kind.
Okay, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Okay, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.